This episode is brought to you by Libro FM, the first and only company that lets you purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore. Ours is the Reading Rock Books in Dixon, Tennessee. You can pick from more than 150,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there. You know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports the community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to get more books into your busy life. Listen during your commute, while doing chores, walking the dogs, or just relaxing at home. All you need is a smartphone and the free Libro FM app. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations and curated lists from the people who know audiobooks best, booksellers. The Good Old Days has a special offer for you. Get 2 audiobooks for the price of one with your first month of membership using the code OLDDAYS, all one word, OLDDAYS, Old Days. There's also a special offer until the end of 2020 for the holidays. When you buy a 12-month Libro FM gift membership, either for yourself or for someone else, half of that will go directly to the bookstore of your choice. The offer is only valid for new members in Canada and the U.S. Now on to our show.
On the afternoon of December 25th, 1929, residents of a small farming community in Germantown, North Carolina, heard a series of gunshots coming from the direction of the family home of Charles Davis Lawson. Assuming the Lawsons were engaging in a little Christmas rabbit hunt, the neighbors thought little of it, until friends of the family stopped by to wish them a Merry Christmas. What they found inside the cabin sent the visitors running. The entire family of Charles Lawson, including his wife, Fanny, and 6 of their 7 children, were lying inside on the floor, shot and bludgeoned to death. In the woods nearby, Charlie Lawson was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The murder-suicide sent shockwaves through the community, most of whom were kin to Charlie and Fanny. And before long, word of the crime spread beyond the confines of Germantown. People from all over flooded the area to see the crime scene for themselves. And 90 years later, Charlie's motive for the slayings is still up for debate. But evidence suggests something dark and sinister in the family's past. This is the story of the Lawson family murders. This is The Good Old Days, a podcast at the corner of history and true crime. I'm Maggie Coomer.
And I'm Jasmine Brand.
And welcome back. It's Christmas time again. I feel like we talk about Christmas last 3 episodes. Yeah?
Almost.
I'm tired of talking about Christmas. So a couple of things before we get started. We have a new logo. We have rolled it out. It should be everywhere. And if there are a few stragglers, we'll get them eventually. But we really like our new logo. God, it was a headache, though.
We designed it ourselves.
We did design it ourselves, and we could not decide. How long did it take? We've been trying to redesign this logo
months.
For like 4 months.
Yeah.
But we've rolled it out. We hope it's gorgeous. We hope you like it. We have planted that logo all over some beautiful merchandise, people, at thegoodoldayspod.com. We have a brand new shiny merchandise store. Jasmine, what do you want to tell them about it?
Well, we designed all of that ourselves too. So all of the merch you're seeing is things that we've come up with and created, and we hope you like. And in that same vein, if you don't see anything that you would like, you can tell us, and we can very easily add that as a special item. And we're going to be rotating the items, is what we decided to do, is we're going to have 9 things up at a time and see what you guys like, see what's popular, and see what we like too.
Hopefully people like it, and if not, it's just going to sit there, and that's that.
And we have Patreon up and running too, so you might have noticed our episodes have ads now. So if you don't want to listen to the ads and you want them a little bit early, we're trying to get better at this. But
I'm adding like a couple hours each week. Like this week, I think it was like almost 12 hours early. So I'm just going to keep adding hours until I get to a full 24. And then we'll be good.
We're getting there. So if you want them a little bit early, you don't want to listen to ads, and if we start getting a nice influx of Patreon subscribers, we'll be sending out some goodies to select Patreon.
I have ordered stickers. We're going to be ordering other fun stuff in the future. Maybe do a little unveiling on social media or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And then when we get to a certain number, we'll have to send all of our first, so however many Patreon subscribers
By the way,
gift.
Weren't we going to call out our 8 amazing Patreon subscribers?
Oh, yeah. We have 8 now.
We have 8. And we're not going to use last names, but first one, Nick C. Wonder who that is. Doy B. Jack B. Joanne B.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Michelle B. Becky E. Thank you so much, folks. Your support enables us to upgrade and get better and bring you better content. So we really appreciate it. That gives us the warm and fuzzies, especially around the holiday season. So we hope all of you have a wonderful holiday. And we hope you enjoy this episode. Yeah.
Well said.
All right. And don't forget to subscribe to the Good Old Days podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. What are we talking about today, Jasmine?
Ooh, it's good. It's really good. It's gruesome.
Oh my God.
It's gruesome, but it's good.
This story got to me. It really did. It hit me where it hurt. So just a warning. It is pretty tragic. So if you're feeling a little depressed for during the holidays, this may not be the right episode right now. But I think it's good. And I am excited about it.
We're going to talk about some, what is it? How do you pronounce it? Familicide?
Familicide.
Basically some family annihilator stuff.
We're talking about a family annihilator today, and it's rough. 8 deaths total. There are 2 people, a man named M. Bruce Jones and Trudy J. Smith. They're a father and daughter duo who began researching the Lawson family murders back in the late 80s. They published their account of what happened after interviewing neighbors and friends and family members. A big source of information was the niece of Charlie Lawson, and her name was Stella Lawson Bowles. So a lot of this information was recorded about 60 years after the actual event.
So there are 2 books that both talk about this. Trudy J. Smith is involved with both of them. The first one she worked on with her father, and that came out in 1990. That's the one I read, called White Christmas, Bloody Christmas. And I just looked, and it's actually been updated since, so I read the old version. And then there was a 2006 book that Trudy worked on called The Meaning of Our Tears, The Lawson Family Murders of Christmas Day, 1929. And that is the one that Maggie read.
Mm-hmm. We also read a bunch of articles, so we're going to put all of the required information for you guys to do a little extra reading if you'd like at thegoodoldayspod.com.
And also, underneath the text, I'll post, there's, I think, 2, maybe 3, crime scene photos. So I'll post those on there, too.
24-year-old Charles Davis Lawson married 19-year-old Fanny Marning on March 12, 1911. They were farmers living in a township called Lawsonville near Charlie's parents and several of his brothers. In the late 19-teens, Charlie's brothers began moving their families to Germantown, North Carolina because of its reputation for profitable farming land. Tobacco farming was a lucrative trade at the time, and they wanted their chance to till the profits from the rich Germantown soil. Charlie loaded up Fanny, their now 4 children, and their belongings into a wagon and made the journey from tenant farmer in Lawsonville to owning 60 acres in Germantown. He signed the paperwork on October 23, 1918, which, fun fact, is my birthday. October 23rd, not 1918. Although that would really be cool. I would really enjoy that, being that old but looking like I do. Anyway, he bought the property for $1,500. Do you know what that is in today's currency?
Modern day conversion is $25,850.56, just to be super precise. And for comparison, I just looked on Realtor.com, so this is current to today. Mm-hmm. A 65-acre lot near Germantown just sold for $410,000.
Wow. Germantown is about 13 miles north of Winston-Salem. Things went south for Lawson when he developed a nasty bout of arthritis in 1919, and he spent months bedridden, unable to work. Presumably, because he couldn't make his payments, the land's ownership quickly went back to the original landowners, and he back to the status of tenant farmer. For the next 8 years, things progressed steadily for Fanny and Charlie, and they added 4 more children to bring the bunch to a grand total of 7 after they lost one son to pneumonia in 1921. Charlie decided to scratch his itch to be an independent farmer one more time in 1927 when he bought 114 acres for $3,200. He agreed to pay the mortgage in annual installments of $500, so this was an enormous risk. But Lawson was super optimistic because tobacco prices were high, and he also had a hefty support system. His eldest children, Marie, Arthur, and Carrie, were all old enough to help him in the fields. And 3 of Charlie's own brothers, along with their wives and gaggles of their own children, lived within walking distance of him. And they all helped each other out with labor, tools, childcare, etc. A few of Fanny's sisters lived nearby too. Planting was clearly a family affair, right, Jasmine?
Yes, the whole Lawson family would have been expected to pitch in and help with the family business, which was growing tobacco.
And corn, apparently.
Yes, although the corn would have gotten more difficult to grow over time. North Carolina has a particular problem with their soil because no one seems to be rotating their crops properly. Mm-hmm. I don't know why this is.
Well, in Trudy J. Smith's book, she said that it was really common for them to burn the remnants of the tobacco plants and then mix that in with the soil, till it with the soil to fertilize it. And that's what they would do. But I think you're supposed to rotate, not
that doesn't
burn. Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily help because all that's helping is the topsoil. You're still not, doing what you need to do. And I'm not a farmer, so I don't know that anything I'm saying is correct. But
I do know that each particular crop, they rely on a certain brand of nutrients, basically. And so you rotate your crops so each plant draws different nutrients and gives the soil time to kind of regenerate. And so corn is extremely exhausting. Like, it takes a lot of nutrients to grow corn. I tried to grow corn in my personal garden, and they half developed, and they were this big. They were terrible, and it was very disappointing.
Oh, no.
They all came up, though. It was so promising for such a long time, and then they just stopped growing. Like, the plants were just, swaying in the wind, and the corns just looked so sad. Anyway.
Fun fact, they grow tobacco really near my house, and I don't know if you've ever smelled it when you've come over. But
it's awesome.
Sometimes if you're outside, it's just all of a sudden you can just smell when they're smoking the tobacco, and it's a really cool thing.
Yeah. So that drying process is actually really interesting. Trudy made a really great effort to put you in the time period. And she got really technical with different aspects of farming and survival and what you would have to do. I got a great picture of what a day in the life of this family looked like from top to bottom. It was awesome.
So any money that they would have made off of this is obviously to pay their very, very risky mortgage and to try and fill in the gaps with things that they couldn't grow. So different food, and that's going to be something they're increasingly doing, is buying food from, other farmers and importing it from other places.
So you're working constantly.
Yeah, and if you have a bad harvest, that's it.
Yeah.
You're done.
Going to starve to death.
Yeah.
You got to go live with a family.
It's not good. Because of this, a lot of farmers in the South, and honestly throughout the country, had already started to experience depression long before the stock market ever crashed in 1929. You mentioned tenant farmers, and any tenant farmers are paying a premium for the land that they're leasing, and that land price does not change based on what they can actually get out of the property. So if they don't make a good crop, they don't have enough to pay their rent. Same with the Lawsons. If they don't make a good crop, they don't have enough to pay their mortgage, and the whole cycle kind of repeats itself, the poverty cycle, which is what a lot of people are living with. And in fact, I think it's about 50%, over 50% of North Carolina at this point is living as tenant farmers.
Well, this family is a really good example. It's like, okay, a boy meets a girl. They have 10 children. All those 10 children, boys meet girls. They have 10 children, and it just goes on and on and on. It's just such a different way of life than I can, wrap my brain around. But it was definitely this is what you do, and you just keep doing it, and then your kids do it, and then their kids do it.
That's
just what we do.
Yeah, that's what you do. It wasn't, I mean, today we talk about, oh, I want to grow up and become this. In 1929, still, you would grow up and do what your parents did for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, Great Depression, you'd be lucky to do what your parents did.
So difficult times.
Mm-hmm. So really, really
for
difficult.
farmers and for workers, for everyone.
Exactly. And farmers were lucky if they had their farm and they could keep it and they could keep doing it. But many, like the Lawsons, were in the same situation and they weren't as lucky to hold on to it. And it obviously becomes a very big pressure in Charlie Lawson's life.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that excuses anything he's about to do, but this is what is going on in the background.
Provides insight.
Yeah, exactly.
Understand it better.
Exactly. So, what else? I already talked about that. Now, despite like worsening conditions throughout the 1920s, as you talked about, Charlie Lawson is able to scrape enough together to build himself out of that lowest poverty cycle, and he does manage to buy land back and farm it. But it's a very risky mortgage. It's gonna prove difficult in the times they're about to go through, and he is fully aware of that, having owned property before
and lost it.
Yeah. So he knows what kind of pressure he's under, and also by this point, he's in his 40s. Like, he's not going to get another chance at this. This is it. If it doesn't work, what is he going to do for his whole family?
Yeah. There's probably an impending sense of doom, especially when the stock market actually crashes. I don't know if that, honestly, that didn't even come into Trudy's book.
No,
she didn't even reference it, that it didn't even affect them, really.
Yeah, and there were quite a lot of ballads, weirdly, when I was doing my research for this. There's a lot of songs about this, especially, I mean, you can imagine Appalachian folk is kind of, imagine what they're listening to and what they're playing, if they're playing any music. I don't know if anyone in this family was musically inclined. I'm sure someone out of the 4 families and all of their kids could play something. But, you know, they're going to make up songs that are relevant to their situation. And one of the ballads that I read was talking about how when the stock market crashed, no one even noticed because they were already in a depression of their own.
Right. Oh, really? That's interesting. Wow.
In fact, let me pull up the lyrics for you. Okay, so the lyrics, and I found these, it was on the North Carolina Agriculture website, the .org, and the lyrics were, well, someone told us Wall Street fell, but we were so poor we could not tell. Cotton was short and the weeds were tall, but Mr. Roosevelt's going to save us all.
Wow.
I mean, this is a little bit later because they're talking about Roosevelt coming in and fixing everything. But yeah. Basically, it didn't affect them to the manner that it's affecting people living in urban areas.
Right.
But they're already going through that because, of course, if you think about it, if stocks are down on tobacco and cotton, then prices are down. They can't sell their product for as much, or they can't sell it at all. You know, so it does all have a domino effect.
And if everyone in your county is selling the same thing, you've completely pennies on the dollar, and then you're really screwed. You know, Nick told me the other day, and I haven't researched this myself, but it costs farmers more to grow corn than it does to sell it at market. And so the government has to subsidize them to keep them growing corn. That's crazy. That doesn't make any sense.
If the government didn't it's because of the supply chains. So it doesn't cost them more to grow it. It costs them more to get it to where it needs to be, because you have the bulk of corn being grown in the Midwest, but it needs to make it all around the entire country. And so that's what costs. It's the shipping, it's everything else, and water as well in the Midwest. When they go through bouts of not having enough water, it gets really, really pricey.
Yeah, I'm from Missouri and Kansas, so I'm familiar. Well, like, I farmed. I'm not saying that. I just remember, like, you know, it was a little dry and Mom's geraniums were shriveling up. So despite all these hardships, obviously Charlie Lawson made a play. He bought land and made a go of it. This is it. This is pretty much his final shot. A few months after buying his new property in 1927, Charlie Lawson sustained a head injury. He was fixing up his tobacco barn, and he smacked himself in the head with a wooden board. It bled profusely, but Charlie reportedly did not lose consciousness. After a doctor bandaged his head, he was up and moving about. Not long after this incident, Charlie started experiencing chronic headaches, and his behavior began to change. Charlie got into a physical altercation with a man at a tobacco market in early 1928, and he actually spent 2 weeks in the hospital after being stabbed twice. But the important thing to point out about this particular altercation, this was a black man, and people make a big deal out of this racial component. But basically, this man was pushing a cart through the tobacco mart and accidentally hit Charlie in the leg. And it hurt him, and he flipped out, and he used racial slurs and threatened to kill the man if he ever did it again, and made a huge scene in the middle of the tobacco market. Well, while Charlie was rubbing his leg, the man came back through with the cart and hit Charlie in the leg again, at which point Charlie attacked, basically tackled this guy. The guy produced a switchblade and stabbed Charlie twice. Now, Charlie chased this man out of the tent, apparently, but collapsed because he'd been stabbed twice in the torso, and he spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Now, why do you think people make such a big deal out of this?
Because in the 1920s, the KKK saw a massive rise. So just a few years before this happened, there had been a 50,000-man march in Washington, D.C., and, the Klan meetings were back on. There was a lot of racially aggravated attacks and assaults. This is shortly after, not shortly, I guess the Red Summer in Tulsa had happened within this decade.
So it's about a decade later.
Yeah, so it's within living memory. So there's a lot of racially motivated crimes that are happening. So people are going to put a lot of emphasis on this because there is that racial component, and Charlie has made it racial, bringing in the different slurs that he's calling this man.
By the summer of 1928, Charlie's behavior was strange enough for Fanny to mention something to her sister-in-laws. She told them that Charlie would sit up at night, sobbing and praying, and would never tell her what was wrong. One night, she woke up and he was not in the house. She found him in the middle of a cleared-out cornfield, on his knees, weeping. Stranger still, he had his shotgun with him. Another night, she found him on the railroad tracks behind the house, and he'd made a little campfire for himself in the middle of the night. Now, Charlie Lawson had a reputation as a hothead, so people tended to walk on eggshells around him. Even his brother, Marion, noticed strange behavior, but this was happening at a time when people tended to mind their own damn business, and Marion was no different, though his daughter Stella, whom Trudy J. Smith consulted for most of this information, recounted years later that he'd wished he would have pressed Charlie for an explanation at the time, that maybe he could have stopped this from happening. If only he had, he might have known things were deteriorating inside of the Lawson home. Fanny gave birth to a daughter named Mary Lou in August of 1929. The Lawsons now had 7 children under the age of 18 and 4 under the age of 10. They had Marie, who was 17, Arthur, who was 16, Carrie, who was 12, Maybelle, who was 7, James, who was 4, little Raymond, who was 2, and of course, newborn baby Mary Lou. Trudy J. Smith and her father interviewed countless relatives, friends, and neighbors of the Lawsons for their 1990 book, White Christmas, Bloody Christmas. One detail that surfaced is that by fall of 1929, Arthur, Charlie and Fanny's 16-year-old son, was sleeping in his clothes so he could be ready at a moment's notice in case his father went berserk in the middle of the night. No one went into great detail about what was actually happening inside of the home, but it could not have been good. Arthur, who would eventually be 6'4" when he's full grown, started standing up for himself, even physically thwarting his father's most recent attempt to whip him in the tobacco fields for driving his mules too close to the plants. The dynamic had shifted. Suddenly, there was a person within Charlie's household who he could not physically overpower. Things were tense, and Charlie was starting to lose control.
By early December of 1929, and as Christmas is creeping closer, Charlie isn't sleeping at all. He's suffering from chronic migraines and insomnia. Although he sought medical treatment from all different kinds of doctors, none of them offer any kind of diagnosis that offer him any kind of relief. And again, this is rural 1929 North Carolina, so I don't know what kind of access to medical doctors he had, but For this, mostly, as far as I'm aware, they would have been offering him things like cocaine drops and Coca-Cola, like those sorts of things, which aren't going to help, anyone with erratic,
Psychosis?
angry behavior. I mean, if anything, it's just going to make it worse.
Right. Well, I know that apparently were a team of brothers who were doctors in the area. And so they did have access to a town doctor. Like the doctor would be present for all of the births. If these women were having so many babies.
But also medical, like any kind of formal medical training is in its infancy.
Right. You are absolutely correct. So they have no idea what's wrong with him, let alone they would never in a million years have been able to diagnose a psychological issue with him.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, they're looking for something physically wrong, which they can't find.
A brain tumor, cancer, and they can't figure out what's up.
Yeah, so they're not going to be able to figure it out. I mean, they're years away from any kind of way of diagnosing that. And even today, based on what we know about him, I don't know if we would find a cause for his behavior even now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these kinds of crimes have been on the rise. In fact, not on the decline. So
I know. Yeah, Chris Watts. I mean, I'm going to name like 5 cases in the past 10 years. But yeah, that Chris Watts documentary, did you watch that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had the same feeling at the end of that documentary as I had at the end of Trudy J. Smith's book, which was, I felt really bad.
Yeah. There's no happy anything with these kinds of stories.
No, it's not. This one, and this, I almost started crying. Yesterday, I finished this book. And my husband was standing behind me in the kitchen. My writing desk is in our dining room. And I turned around and I just looked so dejected. He was like, I don't know why you do this to yourself. And I'm like, it's for the art.
It's important.
It's important.
But this is something that's only been recently identified as I wouldn't say as an issue, but like as a certain type and categorized type of person in crime.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that we talk about these things because the more we do and the more we look into it, the more of a chance we have to catch people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before anything like this happens. But anyway, they didn't do that, obviously, in 1929, and he just gets worse and worse and worse. And, as Christmas is approaching, his wife, Fanny, is going to ask him if they had enough money left to buy Christmas presents for the children that year. And again, this is a high pressure situation for him. He's got all that mortgage to pay. It's not a great year anyway. The stock market has crashed, which is going to crash the prices the following year on that harvest. So he's got a lot of stress on top of that. And rather than just tell her that and, have open alleys of communication, he tells her not to worry and that he's got a surprise for the family. Just wait and see. Which sounds very ominous.
Mm-hmm. And it is.
It is very ominous. A few days later, Charlie took the whole family to Winston-Salem. So again, it's about 13 miles south of where they are.
Yeah, south. They're north.
Yes.
Winston-Salem is south.
Yeah. So he takes them to Winston-Salem. It's about 13 miles south of where they are for a family photo. So not exactly your mall photo, but close. 1920s version. He buys them each a new outfit for this photo. And that's because this is going to be a really expensive undertaking. We're thinking of, you can pull out your phone and take one. No, this is a really pricey thing to do.
Mm-hmm. This is an extravagance.
Because, again, they're already struggling, and it's just a cost that they probably don't need right now. So the sources that I've read have said 2 different things about this whole photo idea. One said that it was out of place because it would have been so expensive. So, Fanny's concerns are absolutely rooted within this first idea. And that farmers really wouldn't have done this because, again, price. Other sources I read said that they owned their land and they were quote unquote well-to-do for the area. So it wouldn't have been out of place. It would have been something fairly typical, especially as they've had a new family member and everything else. I tend to lean with the first theory because it is pricey. It's super expensive. And based on photographs I've seen of their property, anything that they were having extra, any money, is going to go into that to try and, put it all into making as much money as they possibly can to keep their land.
And by the way, Trudy Smith told a story that I guess a neighbor kid told her.
Mm-hmm.
And the neighbor kid's father had tried to get with Charlie and say, hey, like, we know things are tight for you this year. We want to come together. My wife and I would love to help out and buy you some Christmas presents for your kids. Charlie's like, no, I don't need that. They don't need Christmas presents. Like, that's not what we do. So leave me alone. And so the guy goes behind Charlie's back to Fanny and says, hey, like, we just want to give him a little something. Here's some candies and, just like little treats. And she said, reportedly said, oh, this is wonderful. I'll make sure the children don't tell their father. So, I mean, he was obviously, I'm definitely leaning towards the first point that you brought up, because it's like, no, I mean, these people were not well off. They were living hand to mouth. Like, they didn't celebrate Christmas regularly. They have 7 mouths to feed. That's a lot of expense. And you owe $500 a year. I mean, holy shit. He's only farming like 115 acres. And that's not even, I'm including the parcels of land with their yard and their house and all of that stuff. So I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be a very good position to be at the beginning of the Great Depression.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So look at this photo. So describe what you're seeing. This is the Lawson family photo that was taken a few days before the murders.
Yeah, and we'll post this on the website.
This will probably be our cover art.
Probably. So basically, I'm seeing a very well-dressed, fashionable family for the 1920s. I mean, you've got Marie there in like a very up-to-date dress. It's got the drop hem and some fancy lace around the collar, a nice necklace, although she looks pissed off.
Yeah, she does.
She does not look like a happy person.
And probably for good reason, which we will talk about in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with her whole stance here, but she looks really angry. And then you've got her brother next to her, and on the other side of her, her parents and the baby. And again, they're all dressed really nicely. All the guys are in suits. Even the little boys are in suits. And the little girls are in like nice collared kind of Peter Pan dresses. And they all have quite like nice haircuts. It looks like they were, taken out to the salon. I don't know if that was part of their outing, but they have the cute little 1920s bobs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell you, the baby, so little Raymond here, you see that little 2-year-old boy who's looks like his suit jacket is eating him up. I think that is the reason right there. That cute little boy. I can't. Like, I look at him and it makes me tear up, Like, that's just so much innocence right there. It looks like he's just letting his suit jacket swallow him up, and he's so cute.
Like, he's really nervous, and
yeah, he's like, what is this thing? I don't know what this big box
he's in between his 2 older sisters.
I know. And look, she's got her arms around his little suit jacket arm. And I mean, it's just fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's so sad. It's so sad to know the outcome just a few days later. So let's
that's part of the reason this photo is part of the reason this case blew up so much, because you really could put faces to all of the people that it's talking about. And they're normal people. They're in the same situation as a lot of people were at this time. I mean, North Carolina, was 50% of families were exactly like the Lawsons.
Charlie and Fanny attended a wake 6 days before Christmas, and witnesses reported him saying, quote, I wouldn't mind dying, but I'd want to take my family with me, end quote. Christmas morning, Fanny, along with her eldest daughter, Marie, rose to start cooking for Christmas. Fanny was making a big breakfast for the family, and Marie was baking a cake. And then this cake becomes a very big deal in the coming story. It was a multi-layer cake with white icing and raisins on top. Now, according to her cousin, apparently Marie loved to bake cakes and would borrow cake pans from the neighbors to attempt extravagant bakes. And I thought that was a kind of a neat little character attribute to Marie. And I think that it's nice to hear some of that in true crime, because all the time it's the person died. Let's talk about their brutal death, and let's never humanize them or talk about like anything interesting about them. And I thought that was a nice little character attribute there. The second eldest, Arthur, who was 16 at the time, went out early to hunt rabbits with his cousin Sanders, and they used up all their ammunition. Charlie sent him into town to get more, and this effectively removed the only person who could physically overpower Charles from the house. Before their own Christmas dinner, the daughters, Carrie and Maybelle, decided to go to a neighbor's house to wish them a Merry Christmas. And Charlie was lying in wait in his tobacco barn with 3 guns, a repeating rifle, a double-barrel shotgun, and a single-barrel shotgun. When the girls were close enough to the barn door for Charlie to hear their footsteps, he stepped outside and shot both of his daughters. He shot Carrie with the rifle first. She'd apparently held her hand up to shield her face, and the bullet had gone through her hand and into her head. He shot Maybelle in the back with the shotgun while she was running away from him. And just for good measure, Charlie bludgeoned both of his girls with the butt of his gun before he dragged them inside the barn, propped their heads up on stones, and crossed their hands like they were at their wake. He then went towards the cabin. His wife, Fanny, was on the front porch, arms full of firewood for the wood stove she was cooking Christmas dinner on. He shot her in the back with the shotgun while she was walking through her front door. Marie was probably killed next. He shot her in front of their fireplace. The little boys, James, who was 4, and Raymond, who was 2, tried to hide from their father, but Charlie bludgeoned both boys to death where they stood, James behind the stove and little Raymond under the bed. Last was 4-month-old Mary Lou. For the sake of everyone's sanity here, we're just going to say he killed her too. Now keep in mind, this is Christmas Day. People are walking from house to wish each other a Merry Christmas. Charles's brother, Elijah, and his sons came to do just that within minutes of these murders. They saw through the windows that something was wrong, and when they tried to open the door, it hit Fanny's foot. They saw the blood and went running from the house, fearful the murderer might still be inside. After the bodies were discovered, Lawson's yard quickly filled with family members, neighbors, and noisy bystanders. Charlie was nowhere to be found. Arthur's cousin retrieved him from the general store, and when he was told of his family's murder, he was in complete shock, and they went back to the property. Everyone began searching for Charlie, and several hours later, Charlie's dogs came bounding out of the woods towards the crowd of people in front of his house. And then all of those people heard a shotgun blast. The deputy sheriff found Charlie's body with a self-inflicted gunshot blast right through the chest. He'd apparently been there for hours, pacing around a tree, long enough that he'd worn a circular path into the ground. In Charlie's pockets, they found 2 half-written notes. The first, quote, "Troubles can cause," end quote. And the second, "No one to blame but," end quote. So do we need to take a deep breath after that? That was pretty intense.
Yeah, I think so. I think we do.
In through the nose, out through the mouth.
What was our stretching we did earlier?
Oh, take a deep breath. Extend your arms over your head and flow to the left.
As you
and
exhale.
Flow to the right. And we're cleansing our aura.
Don't forget to breathe.
So, Jasmine, what happens after the murders?
After the murders, they basically have to take the family and prepare them for a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really small community. This is a couple hundred people live in this community. And so what do you do when something like this has happened? And they don't really know. So they take them, I think it was on sleds, wasn't it? I don't know. Is that the right plural of sleds? Sleighs?
I don't know. But yeah, so there had been like 6 inches of snowfall, and the Lawson driveway was apparently very steep, so they couldn't get the hearses up the hill. They had to throw together some makeshift sleds and take each body down, and apparently they dumped Marie's body on accident.
I'm sorry, I'm just picturing all these like popsicle corpses on a sled. Just sliding
I mean, yeah, it's...
Don't put that in there.
I'm not. But I mean, like, what, how? I understand, but can you just imagine? Like, this is so brutal.
I mean, all of the people not all of them, but I mean, can you imagine the gunshot victims with a shotgun?
Oh my God.
Like having to try and move them.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's gory.
It's awful. But anyway, they have to somehow get them there, and they do. I think the coroner they take them to, or sorry, the mortician. I don't know what the proper term is.
So there was the coroner. Mm-hmm. So the coroner's job apparently is just to like pronounce death. And so they took them to a funeral home where the mortician could process the bodies for burial. And that, I believe that was a few towns over because the one in their county couldn't accommodate 8 bodies at one time.
Yeah, I know it wasn't right there. They had to go elsewhere. And because they didn't know what to do with them, they all ended up together. Charles Lawson is taken with them, and he's prepared with them, and he's shown with them.
By noon the next day.
And people start rolling into town. This is a massive thing that's happened. And word spreads super quickly. And all in all, about 5,000 people will roll into town for when their funeral happens.
They were all buried together in the same mass grave. And the tombstone read, "Not now, but in the coming years, it will be in a better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and then sometime we'll understand."
But we still don't understand.
No, I don't. And honestly, I know they probably didn't have another thing to do with him, but how could you put the murderer in the same grave? And
they didn't understand it so much that they took his brain out, like removed his brain.
That's right.
And sent it off to be studied.
So the coroner apparently was assisted by a physician from Johns Hopkins, and that physician removed Charlie Lawson's brain, put it in formaldehyde, and took it back to Johns Hopkins. And no one knows the location of the brain. I found a message board about this case online, which is a dark and scary place. And apparently someone surmised that it would have been far too long for it to still be preserved. But I thought formaldehyde was supposed to preserve it forever. If it were in a glass jar.
I don't know. I don't know how long it would stay.
The location of the brain is currently unknown. But
there'd be something of it left. Maybe not enough to examine it as they would have in 1929, but there would be something.
Agreed.
Not that we would know any more about it today. I'm guessing. I don't know.
I bet we would with all the brain scans and stuff we can do nowadays. I bet we could know a lot about him. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, but don't... Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole of...
Yeah, I'm sure that there would be some indications of him being a family annihilator. Maybe. I don't know. But let's talk about family annihilators. So this is a classic family annihilator. Tell me about what you found. I think you found a study, right?
I did.
Okay.
It was published in the Howard Journal of Criminal Justice. This particular study looked at 71 different families and annihilators. And they found 59 of them were male, and 55% of family annihilators were in their 30s when they committed this crime. Kind of an interesting stat. Yeah. I mean, he's in his 40s, so he's just...
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, he's just
44.
at the cusp.
He's 44.
But he's of that, like, age demographic. I mean, think about it. When we put in our age of, like, what bracket we're in, he's in that, like, whatever. This study goes on to say that the frequency that these kinds of cases are happening are increasing. And over half of the murders, like in history that they looked at, and I don't know how far back they went, but over half of them took place in the first decade of the 21st century.
Interesting. So between 1900 and 1910. So he's like barely on the cusp of all these different plot points in studying family annihilators.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, yes. And I pulled a quote as well that said, family annihilators were overwhelmingly not known to criminal justice or mental health services. For all intents and purposes, these were loving husbands and good fathers, often holding down high-profile jobs and seen publicly as being very, very successful. They were simply not on the radar. And while the Lawsons weren't very, very successful, there is that, going back to that theory about the photograph, that they were well-to-do. So there is an element or an air of they're doing better than other people in their situation. Let me just do a quick rundown of those two. So there's 4 types that had been identified by this study.
4 types of family annihilators.
4 types of... So every person that they studied that had committed this type of crime fit into one of these categories. And they identified that as, and I'm going to slightly paraphrase, but also quote, and this was, again, from that Howard Journal of Criminal Justice. So self-righteous killers, and they said that they often hold the mother responsible and will even call and explain what they're going to do before they do it. There's disappointed killers that believe that their family has let them down somehow. So this often relates to religious customs or customs, just whatever family norms, societal norms that they have. Anomic killers, which see the family as a symbol of their own success, monetary success, economic success, and kind of snap once there's an economic failure. And lastly, paranoid killers, who are motivated by a desire to protect their family from a perceived threat. For example, if the children are going to be taken away from them for some reason. This study also goes on to say that self-righteous killers pick significant dates. And of course, December 25th, Christmas Day, is a significant date.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So definitely if you were to look at these killers and put them into a types of killers and put them into a Venn diagram, Charlie Lawson lands in a couple of them. But the fact is that he was probably in dire financial straits. He was 44 years old and had arthritis and had 7 children, 4 of whom were under the age of 10. And, his entire community were his family. And I feel like that's a lot of pressure. If you don't do well, like, this is it. This is his last chance. And then the stock market crashes. And then the winter of 1929 is already horrible. He probably thought, if we all go together, then everything will be fine and we can just take ourselves out of this world. But I think there's also another element that we're about to talk about as well.
Yeah, one of the main theories behind why he did this.
Yes. And that is the theory that he was sexually abusing his eldest daughter, Marie, who was 17 years old. Now, Stella Lawson Bowles, the daughter of Charlie's brother, Marion, was the source of a lot of the information for this book, as I've already said. After sending the original publication to her, so Smith sent her the original publication in the early 1990s a few days before it was set to go to print. And Stella, at that point, called the authors and told them something that she was sworn never to divulge. She said that Marie was likely pregnant at the time of her murder, and that the baby was Charlie Lawson's. This account was further verified by Marie's friend in a 1994 interview between Trudy Smith and a woman named Ella Mae Johnson. So Ella Mae Johnson apparently had Marie Lawson over for a sleepover about 2 weeks before Christmas. So they were getting ready to sleep, and Marie, I guess Ella Mae had noticed that Marie was putting on weight. Like, she was like, oh God, like, she's got a little bit of weight in that gut, And so Marie tearily told her that she was pregnant. And when Ella Mae pressed her for the name of the father, she told her that it was her father and that he knew about it. She also told her that she had finally told her mother, Fanny, because Fanny is the mother of 7 children. And she noticed that her daughter had missed her period 2 months in a row. And so she's like, tell me now. She knows she's pregnant. This woman has had 7 births and numerous miscarriages. She knows what's going on. And apparently pressed Marie until she broke down and told her. Charlie had reportedly threatened Marie, saying if she told anyone, especially Fanny, quote, there would have to be some killing done, end quote. So now at this point, 2 weeks before Christmas, both her father and her mother apparently knew that Marie was pregnant with her father's incestuous love child. And that is a huge theory that Charlie knew that he was about to be discovered, and his entire community is his family. But that's a major theory, is that he killed the entire family because he was about to be found out. He was about to be in financial ruin. His life was about to be ruined because Marie was about to spill the beans about the pregnancy. His wife was probably going to leave him and be probably taken in, welcomed with open arms by the neighbors. And Charlie was about to be kicked to the curb. I mean, these are all possibilities of what could have happened had this come to light. But I also think that Charlie had some serious psychological health issues with the headaches and the crying and the insomnia. That's enough to make anybody go insane.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that's not an excuse at all.
No.
I read another version of this theory where it did say that Marie was pregnant, but that it was someone else's child and he just couldn't take the shame of it. I don't know. I don't know if that's someone like trying to like smooth over the harder details of that, because to add that all together makes it just so much worse.
Yeah.
On top of that, there's been a lot of theories about why Arthur was left alive, basically. Whether it was just because of his sheer stature and Charlie thought that he would be able to overpower him before he finished what he was doing, or if it was so Arthur could kind of cover up any of these rumors and, you know, quash them before they got too big. And of course, we're talking about it today, so that didn't work.
Right.
That maybe wasn't even the point of this. And Arthur doesn't live too long anyway past this, and we never find out what the truth really is. I mean, this is a theory.
Yeah. Well, Marie, I know a lot of people argue against the pregnancy theory because, and they always say the autopsy report didn't show that Marie was pregnant. Okay, couple of problems here. First off, the timing. So they took all of the corpses of the Lawson family, they took them to the funeral home in Yelton, a few towns over, by about midnight Christmas night. And by noon on the 26th, they had those bodies out in the funeral home on display for the viewing. So that's like within 12 hours. Are you telling me honestly, with 8 bodies, that they're going to perform full head to toe autopsies on each body in 12 hours in 1929?
Well, and they're going to be looking for anything other than the obvious. And especially with Marie, her main wound was caused by a shotgun through her abdomen. So even if they had been looking for anything, would they have found it? Right.
Exactly. So I don't know why this is an argument. It's like there's no reason why that should be something that's used to disprove this, because that's not relevant. I don't think it is, because they would not have had any reason to dissect Marie's uterus.
No, I think, again, it's putting modern goggles onto something that happened then. Yeah. It wouldn't have been standard practice to perform an autopsy in 1929.
Now, Arthur, the only surviving member of the family, and I bet that was fucking horrible. So what does Arthur do after he survives? Can he go home, Jasmine?
No, because his house remains a blood-soaked crime scene that the brother basically pimps out for money to quote-unquote pay Arthur's expenses on the mortgage for the next 5 years. They do not clean up the house. That stupid cake that we talked about. Sorry, I have a lot of resentment for this cake for some reason.
Dude, I mean, it's gross. So they never ate the cake, right?
They never ate the cake. And I think it's just such a point of like, that makes me so mad that she's gotten up, she's made this cake. And I don't know why. That was my like big point about this. And I hate this stupid cake. Anyway, it stays on the counter and it was topped with raisins. And like these people who are coming to this sideshow horror scene literally take the raisins off of Marie's cake as a souvenir.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong with you?
And then Marion, the brother of Charles Lawson, who had opened the house up, I think he made the argument that people were coming anyway, so they put a fence up to keep people from coming in and stealing stuff. But he went and bought a glass cake plate to put the cake under glass, and apparently it stayed there for years. And I forget who I was talking to about this, but they were like, what is that, like a super cake? I was like, no, it was a fruit cake. So they last that's the only thing that's going to last. That's the only thing that's going to make it through an apocalypse. Mm-hmm. Cockroaches, crows, and fruitcake. That's it. And Twinkies.
But, I mean, if you cleaned up the crime scene, you're not going to have so many people coming.
Oh, what?
Like, it's...
You don't say.
People are still going to be weird and, like, come and ogle. But if you literally invite them in to look at the blood of the crime scene...
Hold on. Did you mean oogle?
Yeah.
Okay. You said ogle.
I mean, yeah.
Is it?
I think it's ogle. Oh, it's from the 1930s.
Oh. Look at you.
Using the correct slang term.
Yes, you
Apparently
are.
It made a resurgence in the 1990s.
Nice.
Ah, that's where I got it from. In the 1930s, it was ogle. And then in the 1990s, it changed to oogle.
Check that out.
So I'll say oogle because people will have no idea what I'm talking about.
But I'll put all that in there. I'll just snip it up so it's nice and clean. And you figured out that in the 1930s it was called ogle. I love it. Nice
there
job.
We go. All right. So people come to oogle at the blood in the house. And yeah, it stays that way for 5 years. I guess they pay off what of the mortgage they need to. And Arthur, turns to alcohol.
Yeah.
To drink away his problems. And it's interesting, this is, of course, during Prohibition, and this was one of Prohibition's main arguments against alcohol.
Yeah. Well, so they repealed Prohibition in 1933, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's really going off the rails in the late... Oh, I see what you're saying. Never mind.
Yeah. So it's all right. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. So he turns to drink. He starts drinking a lot. And Prohibition has been repealed. But one of the main arguments for it was people were going to behave like Arthur and use alcohol to numb different parts of their lives, I guess.
That's what alcohol's for, ladies.
So he kind of serves as this example of why Prohibition was needed in the first place. Not that anyone says that about him, but just to give people an idea of Prohibitionist state of mind. And being North Carolina and kind of a conservative community, there's going to be a lot of prohibitionists.
Yeah. Also,
a lot of people creating alcohol to make money on the side. That's a whole different thing.
And a whole nother theory is that Charlie may have gotten wrapped up in some sort of Prohibition gang violence and that this was actually a hit on his family and that he was murdered. But, I mean, the gunshots, the blood on Charlie's clothing, how the bodies were arranged, everything kind of points to Charlie just murdering all of his family members and then committing suicide. I really, because of the behavior that was described, that Fanny was telling her sister-in-laws and the women in town, I lean towards a combination of all these factors. I think he was developing some sort of, and I'm not a licensed psychologist, but I have done a lot of research for the show. I think that he was definitely, there was some psychosis happening. Something was going wrong, very wrong.
There has to be to do something like this.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think there's something going on. And how many people have we seen in modern true crime docs that had a concussion and were never the same person?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even with the case of Chris Watts, he met a beautiful unmarried, a woman who wasn't saddled with children. He just wanted to start over. And for some reason, logically thought that the way to do that is just to wipe out his wife and 2 kids. This is, it's illogical. It does not make any sense. These people are trying to get out of this stuff to not face any consequences. However, Charlie Lawson killed himself. So he didn't want, he had no way out. There was no way unless he just fled the country and went somewhere else and tried to start something new, which he's a 44-year-old tobacco farmer from North Carolina. I don't think that, traveling the world is really on his agenda. I don't know. Do you?
No, he had everything that he had worked for his whole life.
Yeah. And he was about to lose it.
And he was. Yeah. And that's
so
probably
he decided to get ahead of it, I guess. If I can't have you, if I can't have this life, this reality, no one can. No one in this family, anyway. This was a hard one. This was really hard. It took a lot. I think this is out of all the episodes that we've done so far, besides the Radium Girls Part 2, I think that this is probably the one that made me cry, or at least got me tearing up. I don't know. What about you?
No, it was a really difficult story, and I think this is a story that we're seeing happen more and more often. And hopefully, as hard as it is to talk about this, the more we talk about it and recognize this type of killer and this type of crime, the easier it will be for people to recognize it before it happens.
Right. Because there were warning signs, but it was 1929 and people minded their own business.
And there are always warning signs, even if they're small.
Right. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we want you to head to your favorite podcasting platform and leave us a review. You can find our entire episode catalog at our website, thegoodoldayspod.com, as well as our merchandise store, link to support the show, our Instagram feeds, our Twitter feeds. But if you'd like to access us on social media, Jasmine, how can they find us?
So search the Good Old Days podcast, but specifically on Twitter, we are the Good OD Pod. On Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, we are the Good Old Days Pod. And we're playing with some live streaming and different things, so follow us and see what's happening.
Absolutely. Well, thank y'all so much. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Have a good week. Goodbye.
Bye.